Hi, my name is Duane Hagerty, and I'm President and CEO of Heritage Works, and we are today doing a kind of a virtual tour of the Jackson Park area in conjunction with 2020 Architecture Days. So again, Architecture Days is a way for us to really highlight the architecture of Dubuque. And Dubuque's architecture is really dominated by its historic architecture, and Jackson Park is really one of the crown jewels of Dubuque historic architecture.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Neises, and this morning we're going to take a walk around Jackson Park. We couldn't do our normal tour for Architecture Days this year, so we are taking advantage of this beautiful day to do a virtual tour to showcase some of the architecture and the landscape of one of the oldest public spaces in downtown Dubuque, which is now known as Jackson Park. Dubuque was founded as a city, as a settlement in 1833, and most of the population and the commercial activity took place south of here in the old Main Street district. So the area we're in now was on the outskirts of the settlement. So naturally, this was the space they wanted to use as a cemetery. So this was known as City Cemetery between 1833 and 1853. And this was before a lot of the housing and the residential area was around here. It was kind of on the outskirts of town. So this is where they buried everybody who from the city of Dubuque. There was significant pressure, however, on this area after cholera outbreaks in the 1840s and 1850s really overloaded the capacity of the cemetery. So in 1857, they established a new city cemetery on the north end of Dubuque out on Windsor Avenue, and they started to relocate the graves to that location. And by the 1860s, 1867, almost all the graves had been moved out of this area over to the new cemetery, which was renamed Linwood Cemetery in the 1870s. After the graves were relocated, they started to landscape this area, leveled it out and graded it. This was a very prominent location. Before all of the houses and the churches and things were built in this area, it's kind of on an elevated location, so you actually had a really nice vista out to the river, so it was very pastoral and beautiful here. But they re-landscaped this as a park, and soon it became a place where wealthy residents wanted to live, was around the park. So a lot of the houses that we're going to see were built between the 1870s and 1880s as the population moved north out of downtown Dubuque and settled in this area as well as up on the bluffs. There were a series of improvements done to the park right from the start in the 1860s. They started to build some little pagodas and gazebos and things like that in the park. None of them were permanent structures that survived up through the ages. The only real permanent structure that was built in the park was in 1913. They built a fountain dedicated. William Lacey built this fountain in 1913 for the cost of $5,000, and dedicated to his father, Judge Benjamin Lacey, who was a prominent circuit court judge in the Dubuque region. And his house was on the corner over there, which eventually became Hoffman Schneider Funeral Home. So that was Judge Benjamin Lacey's home, and he dedicated this fountain here. The figure is done by is of Potosa, who is the Native American woman who was Julian Dubuque's wife from the Meskwaki tribe. The sculpture itself, so I gotta check my notes on this, was done by Leonard Grunell when the park was dedicated. Due to neglect, the water was turned off in 1955 and filled in and in the 1990s, and now it just serves as a reminder of the history of the park and the history of Native Americans in this area. In 2014, they had a rededication ceremony and installed new historic signage around the edge of the park, and members of the Meskwaki tribe were here for the rededication of the park and the reconnection to its Native American history. Okay, one of the more prominent buildings located in the Jackson Park area is Bear Funeral Home. This was originally built as a residence, designed by Fridolin Heer, a prominent Dubuque architect, and done in the Second Empire style, which is characterized by the prominent mansard roof, which covers, the roof wraps around the top of the upper story of the building itself. Tall, narrow windows, beautiful carved details in Illinois limestone. The Bear family purchased this home in the 1940s, 1949, and transformed it into a funeral home. And since that time, they've done a really amazing amount of work, restoration work, reproduced the reproductions of the original doors, conserving all of the windows and reproducing and keeping a lot of the historic details. The iron fence has been beautifully preserved here. There was at one point a modern steel canopy that came down from the door out to the sidewalk that's been removed, really bringing the home back to its original character. Up close here we can see a lot of the carved details that are carved right into the limestone. There's a remarkable amount of carving on this building, not just on the front but wrapping around the sides as well. The building's on a corner lot, so the details on the side were important for this too.
Okay.
One of the unique characteristics of the Jackson Park District is there are a few remaining brick paved streets in this area, kind of a reminder of how all the city streets used to be paved with bricks like this. So there's a brick paved street here. There's this is 15th Street, another block up, there's another brick one, and 13th Street also is brick. There were also a lot of streetcar lines that kind of converged around here on Jackson Park. 17th Street was kind of the upper end of this downtown district, so as the streetcars and things came around here, they circled around and went back downtown.
One of Dubuque's most significant architectural losses was the demolition of Dubuque Central High School, which was located at the northeast corner of 15th and Locust. It was constructed in 1895. Its architect was G.S. Mansfield from Freeport, Illinois. Its architectural style was Richardsonian Romanesque, which is defined by its wide arches and use of stone in its construction. In this case, it was Wisconsin redstone. The building was demolished in 1986.
So the Second Empire style was very popular in the 1880s and 1890s, and we've got a great example here. In the northwest corner of Jackson Park is the Judge Benjamin Lacey House, which was designed by Fridolin Heer Jr. Again, in the Second Empire style. You can see the mansard roof coming around over the top of the top story of the building, tall, narrow windows. This building is brick, unlike the limestone building we saw at Bear Funeral Home. This one is brick painted white, and it's got wonderful decorative details. At the cornice line at the top, you can see there's a wrought iron detailing at the crest, as well as the lintels on each window. The area right above each window is beautifully carved, and the original porch here remains, again with detailing that matches all the lintels and all the other decorative elements on the building itself. Judge Benjamin Lacey was a prominent circuit court judge in the Dubuque region, so a very prominent early resident of this new kind of emerging neighborhood on the north end of Dubuque.
Talk about
you can see the Second Empire style on this home. There are many other homes in this area that also use that same Second Empire style, adapted in some places to a townhouse, as well as other large single-family residences. Here we have what's now the Unitarian Church, but it was originally built as the German Methodist Episcopal Church in 1884. Its style is Carpenter Gothic, and Carpenter Gothic was a style that was very popular in rural areas from the 1840s to
about the 1880s, and this building was built in 1884. And you can see the Carpenter Gothic style has kind of more simpler windows. A typical Gothic window is a pointed arch, and these windows are a pointed arch, but it's more of a geometric pointed arch, and so that would have been easier for a carpenter in rural areas to create that style of window. Across the street from it is the First Presbyterian Church. This building was built in the 1890s, 1896, and the architect was Friedel Hare and Sons. This is kind of your quintessential kind of Gothic revival brick church. You'll see the difference. It has the pure pointed arch windows and this kind of side tower on the corner, and it really does evoke the style of Gothic revival.
We're standing at the foot of one of the oldest buildings in the Jackson Park Historic District, the building that historically has been known as the Dubuque Female Academy Building, built in 1854 for the princely sum of $15,000. So this building sits on a large grassy knoll, and when it was built in 1854, none of the downtown district was here. So it would have sat on top of a large grassy plain that extended all the way out to the Mississippi River, a really lovely pastoral setting. Now the history of the site is that in 1853, Catherine Beecher, who was an outspoken advocate for women's education, visited Dubuque, and she said that she would endow a school if the city of Dubuque provided a facility. So this facility was built. It was endowed as the first girls' school in the city in a time before there was a public education system in Dubuque. It was not successful, however, so it was only open for a few years before it was purchased by the Episcopalians and turned into the Bishop Lee Seminary for Young Ladies from 1864 to 1871. It then became the German Presbyterian Theological Seminary of the Northwest, which eventually became the University of Dubuque, and that was on this site until 1906. It then became the Academy of the Immaculate Conception. It was that from till 1924. It was Lady of Our Lord's Convalescent Home until 1974. Then it was the Dubuque Girls Club until 1981. Then was purchased by Power of Prayer and through 2011 and is now privately owned. The architecture of the site itself has changed dramatically since its original construction in 1854. Originally there was more Gothic detailing on the building. Those towers that you see had very narrow windows with pointed arches on them. If you look carefully, you can see how the brick changes on the face of the towers themselves, where the windows used to be. Those towers had onion domes, which have since been replaced with this crenellated tin in this kind of castle-like form. All the windows basically have been changed in their style over the years and altered fairly dramatically, but it's a really great remnant of when this area used to be a much more quiet pastoral setting where large institutions like this were set outside of the city.
Okay, in the background is St. Patrick's Catholic Church, and it is a church on the north side of Dubuque that was historically known and associated with the Irish population here in Dubuque. The church itself was constructed in 1877. Its design is Gothic Revival, and it has the typical Gothic Revival features with the pointed arches and the central tower. The architect was John Keenan, who was himself Irish. So the interesting thing about this parish is that 2 blocks away is the former St. Mary's Parish, which was a German congregation. And so we have here kind of the division of the ethnicities. You would have your Irish parish at St. Patrick's and your German parish at St. Mary's. The school, of course, would have been next to the church, but in the 1950s, with the growing population because of the baby boom, the parish needed to build a new school. And it is now being rehabbed into apartments for seniors. So it's actually a pretty nice renovation of a school building. It still has maintained the exterior integrity of an early 1950s building.
Right on the corner of the park across from St. Patrick's Church is the former Visiting Nurses Association headquarters here in Dubuque, which was originally built as the Stuber Funeral Home. It was built in 1930, and characteristic of that time, it was done in an Art Deco style. Dubuque just doesn't have that much Art Deco architecture, so it's very noteworthy as a prime example of that style. Art Deco architecture typically has very clean lines, it's very streamlined. Thinking about the era in which it was built in the 1920s and 30s, like streamlining was a really important aesthetic style. So you can see that the architecture is very smooth, it's very machined, looking like a machine polished. These limestone accents around the windows. There's very little applied ornament onto the outside of the building itself, and it does not have a traditional cornice like you would think of on a historic building that kind of caps the building off. It just seems to kind of soar off into the sky. Art Deco buildings also have interesting massing. This building has lots of little bump outs, and at the edges it kind of recedes back into itself. The massing from the front of the building almost looks Mayan, like with different kinds of towers and pillars and stuff that are at staggered heights, giving it a really interesting aesthetic appearance, especially amidst all of the other historic architecture from the 19th century. It stands out as a wonderful example of this Art Deco architectural style. Thanks everybody for joining us on our virtual tour of Jackson Park. Even though we're social distancing and couldn't be in most of the shots together, we wanted to thank everybody for tuning in and really encourage you, like even though you can't be around other people, go out and explore the built environment. We've got some wonderful neighborhoods that are still open for you to go out and enjoy. Look for the architectural details and dig into the history a little bit. We'll hope to see you live next year for Architecture Days.
And I want to thank Dubuque Main Street for supporting the Architecture Days programming. We will be back to a regular schedule of events next year, hopefully. And also for Heritage Works, we will also, as we move forward, we will give you the schedule for Architrek events for the remaining 2020 calendar year. We hope to do some in-person tours, but if we can't, we will do more of these types of virtual tours in neighborhoods in Dubuque so that you can get some information about Dubuque's wonderful historic architecture. So thanks for watching, and we look forward to providing you more programming in the future. Thanks.
Be safe, everyone.
Yeah.
Hey Main Street friends and followers of Architecture Days, it's me, Michaela, and I'm not in my usual office where I do all of my recordings. Actually, you can tell I'm in my spare room, as many of you are also probably turning your homes into spare offices or an additional area for your kids to have school. And I am very excited that this year our partners, we could pull together all of our resources to create this wonderful week to celebrate architecture virtually. Whether you had caught the scavenger hunt with your family driving around, or did it in the safety of your own home using the virtual links, or you had the opportunity to catch the student presentation that was done by the Alternative Learning Center's Alta Vista campus students from Tim Hitzler's class, or you were able to follow along with the Historic Preservation Commission Awards. If you haven't done so, I highly encourage you to follow those, whether it be on Facebook or YouTube or on our website. Check out the celebration and the beauty that is the Dubuque stories in architecture. Today, I want to thank you and wrap the whole week up by presenting the tour that was to take place as our walking tour. Thank you very much to all of our committee members and those who behind the scenes again helped to make this happen. Thank you to the Dubuque community for being continuously supportive of historic preservation, as well as continuing to inspire the youth to find interest in the beautiful architecture and the stories of the past that lie within downtown Dubuque. From Dubuque Main Street, well, actually, my home as Dubuque Main Street, I would like to thank you personally for taking this time to celebrate with us. Hope to see you all soon and continue to stay safe and healthy.